And we're live. Welcome to the Curiosity and Command podcast supported by Kaizen Summit. In each episode, we sit down with thoughtful people to explore leadership, discipline, growth, and ideas that shape how we live and work. And today I'm joined by Mr. Marc Clifford.
Good morning, mate. Good morning. Good afternoon. How are you?
That's close enough, isn't it?
Yeah, near enough. It's only 4 o'clock.
Mate, thank you very much for joining us. We work together, so I've been really looking forward to this, getting to know you really well. And I thought we'd take it right back to the start. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about what your forced transition was like? And I'm cautious with that wording because it wasn't your decision to leave. So what was that forced transition for you, like leaving the military and going into the civilian sector?
Forced transition is a good way of wording that. It was a bit of a wild time, to be fair. So the medical discharge process in itself can be pretty brutal, depending on the circumstances surrounding it, and also kind of what space you're in as an individual at the time. And for me, obviously, with my discharge being around mental health, you can't really see kind of clarity in the full picture. But I think it was also skewed perhaps by the fact that I was discharged during the COVID pandemic. So that changed the entire kind of process and how that was handled very differently. So from coming into a career at 16 and it being all that you know, to at 24, 25, being told that you can't do that thing that you planned a career around anymore. Oh, but also, by the way, there's this virus floating around and you can't leave your house, and we also can't give you any support, is a pretty wild concept to get your head around. And then you're just kind of thrown into the outside world that has changed dramatically over the preceding 18 months anyway. It was an interesting period of my life. For sure.
How has your identity shifted because of that period?
That's a great question. I very quickly had to shift from I am Marc Clifford, I'm a soldier, this is what defines me, this is what my life is about, to finding out who Marc Clifford actually is. Because I think there's a very common thing amongst the majority of guys and girls in the military. I'd say at least 99% of us, our identity becomes that. And a lot of people struggle with that identity, even whilst they're in the military. You know, everything about them is they're a squaddy, or a matlow, or whatever it is that they do. You know, it becomes their entire personality and identity and everything like that. And then obviously one day it's not a career that lasts forever. One day you leave that family, you know, whether they say, you know, you've got the regimental family behind you and the support and everything like that. It's very different living on the outside of the wire where you can't rely on the blokes and you can't rely on a chain of command. Not that you can do when you're in anyway. You're never really taught how to transition out of that. You're taught how to write a CV. You're taught how to look for a job. You're taught how to make yourself appealing to prospective employers, because that's what you're taught is the most important thing when you leave the military. What you're not taught is how to figure out who you are, where you fit into society, what your role is, what your part to play is, and importantly, who you are as a person. And for me, that was a very tumultuous journey surrounded by a lot of negative influences and experiences at the same time. So it was a very difficult period. It's also something that's deeply uncomfortable, I think, right? You know, a lot of us don't want to look inside. We don't want to hold a mirror up to ourselves. And, you know, we're taught about accountability in teams and, you know, being accountable to the man next to you, and every man's a linked man and all of that kind of stuff. But when you've got to be accountable to yourself and you have to have that introspective conversation, you don't like to hold the mirror up to those flaws. Do you know what I mean? We can point and shift about anything to do with the military in general, but when we've got to do the same ourselves, no, we're perfect. We were cheated by the system. You know, we're a byproduct of this, and they've created me like this, and they didn't do anything to help me out when actually they were never going to anyway. So that was a really difficult period for me.
What I'm hearing from you there is it's easy to hide behind the identity of the uniform.
100%. 100%, yeah. It's, I think there's a uniform when you leave as well. And it tends to be, your two-tone Arc'teryx trousers, your North Face top, your Berghaus cap, and your Merrell approach shoes. That tends to be the identity that a lot of blokes adopt and still have that uniform when they leave. And I never had that because, luckily for me, I've got a wife who's got some fashion sense and was like, "You're not wearing that shit anymore." But yeah, there is a uniform that you still kind of sit behind when you leave, whether you believe that or not.
Do you know what your identity is now? Or is that still an ongoing journey?
Yes, I think I've been a lot more fortunate than a lot of guys, and I say fortunate because whether you want to or not, you've got to establish who you are outside the military once you leave. That's a fact of life. You see people cling on to it, especially within, not so much within my regiment, but especially within like parachute regiments and those fucking Royal Engineer frobbers that capitalise RE in everything. It becomes, their identity all the way up until they're old and they're bold, which being proud of your service is one thing, but thinking you're still in when you're 78 and you'd survive national service is a different one. But I was very fortunate that I had a lot of help and had a lot of good people around me that were willing to, persist and help me with that, to help me figure out who I am. So someone could ask me, "Oh, who were you in the military and what did you do and what do you do now?" And it's both answers are very kind of identity led. And I know that part of my life is gone and that's not who I am anymore. And the stage of my life where I'm in now is the phase that I'm in, and that's who I have to be. But I know that identity is also an ever evolving thing. And to be from where I am now to where I want to be in my life, that identity again has to shift. And it's a constant organism, if you like.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about being very fortunate to have people around you when you were transitioning, and you've highlighted yourself that it was a difficult time. How much were you able to give yourself to them and ask for help? Was that something you had to learn and develop over time?
It was something that I was never good at doing before, but it wasn't until I became unwell that I realised that I had to. And it was when I saw the effect it was having on my mum that really made me kind of open up and open my eyes to the fact that I can't put her and my parents through that entire process, and that I need to, as much as I need to get better for me, I also need to, get better for them as well, because it's torture watching, someone you love go through that kind of stuff. So I was very kind of surrounded by love, and it then enabled me to be able to ask for help. Do you know what I mean? Moving back in with my parents and asking for professional help, and asking people when there's things that need to be done, or I can't quite do it because I don't quite have the mental capacity, or I just need that little bit of kind of breathing space or a leg up or a little bit of support or something that I could actually turn and go, "Hey, I know that this is what you're asking of me. I'm not quite capable of doing that right in this second. Can I have a little bit of time or a little bit of guidance or a little bit of leeway with it to be able to kind of process it and get through it?" I think.
When you were in the thick of it, could you recognize it in yourself, or was it only when you saw the impact on other people you realized that?
I think I knew. I think I knew. I think I kind of had that moment where I was like, "What the fuck is going on? This isn't right." But at the same time, I felt that it was just part of life, and it's just something that was happening. I didn't think particularly there was anything wrong. Just think maybe I noticed that something was different, if that makes sense.
How did you put yourself out?
a lot of love. As hippie as it sounds, it was a lot of love from the people around me. And having that realization that people do care about me as a person and not just because of what I can offer them, that, you know, it's that love isn't transactional. You know, I'm very lucky that both my parents are still here, and both my parents are two of the most supportive people that, you know, I've ever met. And I think, like most parents are with their kids, but, you know, mum and dad, for us, for all of us kids, were always, whether they agreed with the decision we made or not, they would give us the space to be able to go and do that and have a go at it, but would greet us with the love and humility if it didn't work and we came back and was like, oh, I probably should have listened to you in the first place, Dad, kind of thing. I met my now wife, when I was going through that period. And you know, when you meet someone and that stage is new and you've kind of got no obligation to that person, you know, very quickly she just kind of realised that I just needed that little bit extra, and kind of gave that to us, and she still does now. And and again with my friends as well, you know, nothing transactional, nothing, you know, oh, Mark's not Mark anymore, I'm not asked about that. And, you know, looking for a relationship that's easier than, you know, having to go and search for your mate while he's having a meltdown and has gone missing, instead of just going, oh, we're going down the pub this weekend, lad, kind of thing. So I think that was the major factor for it, that kind of gives you the self-awareness of, oh, right, okay, you know, something's not right here and I need to figure it out, because that in turn allowed me to learn how to love myself again. And when you love yourself and you love the people around you, it's a very, very big driver.
Super important. There's so many people that will resonate with, of learning to love yourself or relearning, you know, and at some point there are these things in the way that block that signal. And if you can get them out of the way, then...
Yeah. And it's the simple behaviors as well. When people say, oh, you've got to learn to love yourself, you know, it's like, I used to think, oh, you've got to love the way that you look, and, you know, you've got to fall in love with your own attraction of yourself. And I realised it's not that. It's a case of respecting yourself enough that you don't smash your body full of shit like alcohol and fast food and drugs and cigarettes and that kind of stuff, and that you love yourself and you've got enough respect for yourself that you can respect your time and respect other people's time outwardly as well. And, you know, all those little things that, if you were to have an argument with a partner over something and you were to fall out over, would make you kind of have that barrier to love, is the same with yourself. It's not just about how you look, as you can tell.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you there is these small little micro conversations or actions that you do that then build up over time, that like compounding effect as such.
Yeah, it's not one big thing. It's, you know, it's the there's a saying in sobriety of one day at a time, and it's the same with changing your identity and learning how to do that. And with the small actions of loving yourself, it's, you know, one day at a time. You know, how can you love yourself that little bit better today? Is it, you know, having that one less pint? Is it making sure that you get to the gym? Is it making sure that you do your steps? Is it doing something? Is it getting outside? You know, and some days, and I know there's probably people that are going to watch this and go, I need to get to that point, depending on where they're at and their journey. And some days that is just getting out of bed to brush your teeth, because I've had those days where I can't move. And even just getting out of bed to brush my teeth and have some water is, you know, a big thing. And it's the only thing I achieved that day. But it was just showing that little bit of love, or just being able to wash your hair or something like that, because you have those days where that can't happen.
Okay, that's really resonating with me. Can you paint us a picture of what your life was back then and what your life is like now?
Yeah, I can try, for sure. Back then, my day revolved around, when could I have my first drink, where was I having that first drink, and who with, and what was that social aspect like? What obligations did I have to get out of the way before I could have a pint? Did I have an appointment I had to get to? Did I have to go and meet someone? Especially in the period where I was off sick and the world was kind of reopening slowly from COVID, because I was a young squaddy, I was off sick, I had no bills, my salary's being paid every month, and I've got nothing to do other than go to the pub. So, that was kind of like the obligation. But it's then being able to pull yourself away from that. The other side of it, I suppose, was kind of getting yourself to that point. It was weird how alcohol was a big driver for me to get out of bed and do those things. But there would be days where I would just be crippled with depression and anxiety, and I would not get out of bed, and I would sit and I would be doom scrolling and doom scrolling and doom scrolling. And, TikTok was becoming a very big thing at that time. And I kind of became, there were days where I was addicted to that. Like, I just need to see the next video, the next video, and the next video. And I'll get out of bed to have a piss once I've watched this next video. And then all of a sudden it's 2.5 hours later and I'm like dying for a piss. Not being able to, turn the lights on, not wanting to get up and eat, your phone going on to do not disturb so that you're ignoring texts, but still checking your notifications to get that fucking hit of dopamine. That was the very kind of big driver for that. And that's kind of like a day to day. And then now it couldn't be further from the opposite. Every morning, I practically spring out of bed. I wouldn't say I do spring out of bed. I'm nearly there. We do have a 9-month-old, so it's a little bit more sluggish in the mornings now because he's usually got you up during the night kicking you or having a bit of a whinge. And it's just fueled by purpose. I've got that hour in the morning before he wakes up and before my wife wakes up, which is my hour. That's when I can shower and I can have a coffee before the world starts to bother me and texts and emails are coming through, and I can do a bit of reading or journaling or whatever it is. And then I've got the hour before I go about my work day where I've got him and, running through. It's great in the morning when your kid wakes up and the first thing they do is look for you and smile because you're like, oh my God, what a privilege it is to have something that you love so much, think that your arms and your bed is the safest place in the world. And then it's very much driven by, as we were chatting a little bit about before the recording, driven by the outcomes and the desires and accountability to ourselves that we have. And then it's, very much a case of once the need to be done's are done, what are we doing as a family? Are we going swimming? What activity are we doing? What's that quality family time look like? And it's a complete different contrast in such a short space of time.
Do you recognize that previous version?
I see him in a lot of people that allows me to resonate with them and share empathy with them when they ask for help or advice. But within myself, I don't recognize that person anymore.
I've heard a really good example of the post-addiction identity of I am an alcoholic that doesn't drink.
Yes.
As a reminder and a driver.
Yes. There was 2 identity shifts that I had to go through to get to that point. So the first one is you go from I'm an alcoholic and I drink because I'm an alcoholic to I had to tell myself I don't drink because that doesn't align with the person that I want to be, to now, because that was the motivator of keeping myself out of that when the addiction was all I wanted to feed and fuel. And then it becomes I am an alcoholic and I don't drink because that doesn't serve the person who I am. So it very much links back to that initial kind of root cause. And it's the same with smoking, because smoking is an addiction. People don't associate it as badly as say being addicted to drugs or being an alcoholic, but smoking is an addiction, and nicotine is a very addictive substance. And for me not to smoke now, I had to tell myself again, I don't smoke because that doesn't align with the things that I want in my life because of the health issues it was causing. To now, I don't smoke because that doesn't align with the direction my life is going. So it's the same kind of circle that you take yourself through.
So what I'm hearing from you there is quite a very short space of time, actually, quite a few identity shifts from soldier, service leaver, plus the addictions and recovery. That is a lot in a short space.
It is, and ironically, if I hadn't have had to go through the identity shift of soldier or civvy to soldier to service leaver, I wouldn't have had the ability to endure the discomfort for that long to be able to get through that. I wholeheartedly believe that. If my issues and mental health issues hadn't been caused by service and I didn't have that experience behind me of being uncomfortable for so long, I don't think that I would be here now. So although it was the root cause of the mental health issues that led to the addiction, that led to where I am now, I also wouldn't be in the position I am now if I didn't go through that. And I wholeheartedly believe that.
I often talk that service gave me more than it took.
In the macro, yes, I think, because there's in the micro, I didn't believe that. And my mum, I remember vividly the flow of the family liaison officer after I tried to take my life the first time, coming to visit while my mum was at the hospital with me. And, my mum to see a person in uniform at that time when all she did was blame the military for that, obviously wasn't what she wanted to see. And she went, "You're all a bunch of assholes. You took my son away and you stripped him back, and I want him back." And they were her words to the flow. So in the micro, you think, yeah, it strips that away from me, it's taken me away. But in the macro, yeah, I agree. I wouldn't be where I am now in the position I'm in now without losing out in the micro.
How do you feel reflecting on that time period and that experience through your mum's lens?
Through my mum's lens. Now that I'm a parent, I do view it very differently, because you kind of, when you're not a parent, your parents, for the majority of us, are kind of your idols and your models and your kind of role models, and it's a case of you forget that your parents have seen that and they feel the same things that you do, because they're this kind of like almost like messiah-like figure. It's the same as, when parents do eventually pass on, like, oh, I never thought that was going to happen to me. It's the same kind of thing of that. But now I am a parent and I reflect on that and I think, how would I feel if that was my son in that bed? I'm determined to be able to give him the opportunities where he doesn't feel like he's got to go and join the military as a way out of doing what he or wherever he's going, but also various situations in life that are going to happen, and I know they're going to happen, but it's like, how am I going to feel about that? So yeah, it changes, doesn't it? And it's scary, I think it's probably the word. What must have my mum been feeling in that moment, thinking, is my youngest son going to die in front of me here? Yeah.
We can't protect our kids from the world. You can't shield them from it. As I've gone on my parenting journey for nearly 16 years, the way that I reflect on it is we can just better prepare them. That is our role, is to give them the tools to be able to cope and deal with it. And how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
think, so where he's so young, so he's still under 1. I think the biggest thing that we've done so far for that is the fact that we made him fit into our lifestyle, not that we created one around him. And I think that is something that a lot of parents tend to do. Things do change, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that things don't change when you have a kid, because shit changes when you have a kid, and very, very quickly. But like for us, we never stopped traveling with him. So we traveled a lot before, we travel a lot now. All it is now is a slight bit more admin, a slight bit more luggage, and a slight bit more expenditure. But we very much had to have him fit into that world. And I think everyone who meets him says, oh, he's such a happy, smiley baby. And he's a very, very happy kid. He doesn't cry, he doesn't whinge. He's a very, very happy-go-lucky kind of hardy type of baby. He has a little bump and he's just like, oh, right, yeah, sound, I'm off, get up. He doesn't whinge about everything. And I think that was probably the best thing we could have done, straight away. He was 2 days old when he went into his first weekly shop. It took my wife probably about a week to leave the house, but within a week he was out doing stuff, and tummy time and all those kind of like key developmental stuff that he has to go through, just kind of mixed with being surrounded by a lot of adults and a lot of different environments and situations. I think has done him wonders, and it's now a case of how do we develop that as he grows.
Was that something that you were both consciously aware of? This is the tactic that you want to go down, or was it just instinctively that is what you felt the right thing to do?
So it was something that was pre-agreed, like prior to having kids, that they've got to fit into our lifestyle. We can't. Just the way that we live and the way that I am isn't compatible with a 9-to-5 school run, this, that, and the other, and kind of revolving your life around that. Although I know there will be a time where that structure is needed. He still has structure to his day, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be kind of dropping the kids off at school, going to an after school club because we're working too late to be able to pick them up, and the kind of like 2.5 kids white picket fence kind of fantasy that people used to have years and years ago. So it was a very conscious decision for that. It was probably the first thing that we agreed upon when we discussed having a family, and that was kind of reiterated the whole way through the pregnancy as well, with a little bit of grace to allow Liz to learn how to walk again after squeezing a baby seal shaped thing out of her legs.
It's a wild experience to go through. I think it's a really good lesson for a lot of people is communicate and talk about these things. I think a lot of couples struggle with the idea of the baby because they haven't considered the end point. It's been, let's deal with pregnancy, let's deal with labor, but they haven't really considered what's life going to look like post that.
Yeah, I think you can't communicate enough, especially during pregnancy or the process of trying for a baby. You can't communicate enough because there is things and situations and stuff that is going to arise that you've not even thought about. But if you haven't discussed the kind of tertiary to it, you don't understand. You're on the different wavelengths. So even when you're talking about different parenting styles, and you can't communicate that kind of stuff enough. Even simple stuff as, what do you call something? Like, you probably call a dummy something very different to what we call a dummy. You probably call bedtime or being asleep something very different to what we call being asleep. And, all of those minor little tweaks that could create friction because you're both tired. Your wife's probably going to be in pain quite a bit for the first couple of weeks. We also had a rule that for the first 6 months, anything that was said between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. didn't count. Because if you're tired on a night feed or a nappy change, and you're like, oh my God, why are you waking me up? And she's like, oh my God, you're such a selfish fat fuck. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you're only saying that because you're tired and you're stressed. It doesn't count between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.
It's a good rule to have.
Yeah. The downside is she's now carried that on, and I frequently wake up with her going like that above me.
How has, so again, we've hit on another identity point of becoming a father again in that like short space of time. How is being a father talk about that identity? How has that now shaped adding your son into the mix as well?
So it's definitely father first over anything. So the mantra of the British Army and the kind of identity of the British Army for us, especially as tradies, were soldier first, tradesman second, is where now everything comes secondary to fatherhood and family. Fatherhood, family, friends, and the kind of three big kind of drivers and incentives and identity. If there's something that needs to be done professionally that coincides with something that needs to be done with him, he wins every time. And that's not something that I compromise on.
I love that. That's great. It's a good mantra to live by. And talking of that point where you have got so many different things that you're juggling, can you talk about your journey into entrepreneurship?
I kind of fell into it by mistake. Like it's genuinely on an accident that I'm here. I was aware that I was leaving the military, or that was probably going to be the outcome. I hadn't sat final board. I was aware that was probably going to be the outcome, and that's what they were kind of pushing for. I was aware that if that did happen, I'd been surrounded by so many bad examples of leadership and people leaving and going into jobs that they fucking hated more than being in the military, and that's not something that I wanted. So I was like, what is a side hustle that I can do that means I can afford to live but still have time freedom? Because that was the important thing at the time, was the time freedom, but where my overhead's covered. And that's where I started watching YouTube videos on different bits and pieces. I'd run ads in the past as a bit of a side hustle when I was in the military for a friend who had a business. And I was like, okay, let's kind of explore this agency model a bit more. So I was watching loads of YouTube. I thought, just start it, let's give it a go. Let's reach out to a few people, see what I can do. And just discovered by mistake that I was quite good at something like that. And then probably the August of 2020, when I just moved to Manchester during lockdown, and lockdown 2.0 hit again. It must have been the September. Yeah, it was in the September. I sat FMB and they were like, "You're out, son. Like, we're getting rid of you. You've gone in May 21." And I was like, "Yeah, sound." That I kind of went full steam ahead. I think I still had that little bit of hope that they were going to turn around and go, "Nah, come back." But I just went full steam ahead into it and started investing more into some training and education and kind of created a business around it. And then everything from there has just kind of followed. But again, I kind of happened into it. I never thought that I would ever be in a position to buy a business, because I used to think that it was something for venture capitalists and private equity. And here we are, 3 successful acquisitions later, and just about to complete on a 4th. And everything that's kind of happened in between, a lot of people say is kind of serendipity and me putting myself in that position. I think it's a lot of me just kind of bumbling through life, falling headfirst and just seeing what sticks.
I think you make your own luck. You've got to put yourself in that position to make yourself lucky. Fortune favors the brave and all those kind of cliche things, but you've got to be action orientated to be able to do it in the first place.
100%.
You've got to have skin in the game, haven't you?
Yeah, 100%.
What is your checklist then, or what is your process for going through an acquisition now that you've done it a couple of times?
So it's quite a elongated process by the business, or it can be quite an elongated process. So the first thing we've got certain acquisition criteria, which is, size of business that we want to buy, type of business we want to buy, and the internal kind of like structure. So is it owner managed? Is it team managed? What's the kind of situation? Because the team is actually the most important thing when you're buying a business. A lot of people think it's the balance sheet and the assets the business holds and how much cash is in the bank. But for the majority of businesses, unless you're kind of like a massive construction firm, the value in the business goes home every night at 5 o'clock when the business shuts. So that's probably one of the most important things that we look at. You then kind of go through a bit of a fact-finding mission. For some reason, people think that when they sell their business, that someone's just going to turn up with a big fat stack of cash, take it off their hands and away they ride into the sunset, and they're not going to worry about what problems your business has and how it works. So it's a case of delving into that, and it's a little bit of Tom and Jerry. Then it's kind of formalising your offer and saying, right, this is what we think the business is worth to us and what we would be willing to pay. Again, there's always a bit of a song and a dance, and it's just a case of educating on how the process works, most importantly, but also aligning expectations as to why that valuation is probably the most secure option for the business. And then it's the due diligence and legal process, which is very boring, very dull, and would probably mean that you never have any visitors to this podcast again if I dive through that entire process.
So now that you've been through it a couple of times, what lesson have you picked up from each?
There's a few. So the first thing is to not trust the seller implicitly. Always do due diligence and always do your fact finding. That cost us probably about £100,000 with the first one, because they'd hidden and obfuscated and had lied to us because they were scared that we would find something, which we did. However, had we have known pre-acquisition and had they disclosed that pre-acquisition, we could have fixed it and the process would have been a lot smoother and they'd have actually earned a lot more money out of the back end of it. So they kind of shot themselves in the own foot. So not trusting the owner implicitly. Focus on the team more because, like I said, that's the value. They're the value of the business. The first 90 days is the most critical in any acquisition, and the majority of that time should be focused on the team and the man management. It's a big, big transition for people to go through having the company they work for acquired. It's almost like a major life event, almost like parents divorcing. A lot of loyalty typically has been kind of shown to the outgoing seller. So it's a case of you have to build that trust and rapport and show that you genuinely give a shit about that individual. At the end of the day, they run your business for you. They are, the life and soul and lifeblood of what you do. You have to care about that person. You have to find out what motivates them, what makes them work, what makes them, what turns them off, what don't they like, and kind of keep them happy and play into their strengths. And those people that you can keep happy and that you can reward for loyalty and you can actually listen to where they want to be and help them develop and grow as people and professionals are going to give you 10x the output of someone who you don't nurture and water.
What's coming up for me there is you spoke about when you were ill and how you needed to rely on people and support and that connection. And then when you're going through acquisitions, you've mentioned the team, the people. So much of your whole life has been built around the relationships that you built along the way. And it's not, business isn't a black and white, just numbers. It's more important about the relationships that you build and the human element to it.
Yeah. Business is a people game. People don't realise that. Business is a people game. It's not a numbers game. It's a people game. Because on the inverse of that, if I'm an arsehole and the team walks out, I've inherited a very, very expensive job. Customers can walk. Reputation can be tarnished in seconds online nowadays. It is absolutely a people game. And you've got to, especially the people that, you rely upon and you depend upon to be able to help you achieve what your kind of long-term goal is, you need to be able to align that with them, and you need to nurture them, because you can, as much as they're helping you, they're going to expect that help back one day.
Yeah. Service first. I'm such a big believer in that. You can never give enough. Just constantly give.
Yeah. Even if it's the simple stuff. So I'm trying to think of some examples here. We took over a business. We had a woman within that business who worked within the finance department, who was critical to it. She knew the numbers inside and out. She was slightly older. She was in her kind of like late 50s, early 60s at the time. Her husband had taken a new job. Now, she didn't drive. Her husband used to drop her to work every day and pick her up every day. And her husband was almost as much as part of the team as she was. Everyone knew him, everyone loved him. He took a new job, which meant that he was working further away in a different direction and needed to leave earlier and stay later. That didn't work for her because of various commitments and stuff that she had outside of work. And she was really, really kind of worried that she was going to lose her job. She didn't want to go back remote, because that was the option that we gave her, that, a few days a week, if you wish, you can work from home. We've got no issue with that. Provide you with a laptop and a phone and the tools you need. She didn't want to do that because coming to office was her kind of like social circle and was good for her. But she couldn't drive, and that was the obvious issue. That was the obvious fix. So we paid for her driving lessons. We paid for her to learn how to drive, so that she could get herself to work. There was certain grants and things available that other people in the business were utilising to help with the cost of that. So we afforded her the same privilege, and it's that. And she still works now for the company, and it's those little bits that you can kind of do that are very simple that will buy that loyalty. It's the same as there's a woman within our coaching business whose grandmother is very, very unwell, and very often she's called into the care home for various bits and pieces. So she's not expected to come to the office, and we know that her workload can sometimes be kind of delayed or kind of whatever. So it's being able to, what can we afford you to be able to help and make your life easier with that, so that in turn you do still want to come back to us. You do still want to kind of get your work done. And she works incredibly hard for us, and she always lets us know when she needs to just dart off, even if she can't do it before, and always make sure that everything that needs to be done is done. So it's those little kind of bits that you can add to a little bit of grace and humility that will buy you a lot of loyalty from other people. And at the end of the day, it costs us nothing. Why am I bothered that someone can't drive? Or why would I be bothered that someone's grandmother's unwell? Well, my grandmother's been unwell before. That's going to be me someday, and I hope that Huey's boss, if he has a boss, will grant him the same privileges when he needs to come, because I'm trying to, I don't know, throw plant pots out of a care home window or something, whatever it is.
Why are you like this? Where did you get it from?
Plant pots out the window?
No, I don't mean that bit. You're not there yet. Give it another couple of years.
I was brought up by parents with an incredibly strong belief system, and experience, I think.
Both good and bad?
Both good and bad. There's no such thing as someone who's just had a good experience.
No. I remember listening to Tony Robbins cassette. So this is a couple of years ago. And he was talking about his relationship with his mum. All right. And and he was saying how his mum happened for him, not to him, and the relationship that he had with her shaped who he was, and that drives him forward. And that's what's really coming up for me there, is how important this relationship you've got with your parents that has effectively become your North Star, and then all these different dots along the timeline. But because that grounding was so positive from the start, that's kind of kept you on that path, and then is allowing you to provide that service for the people that work with you, alongside you, and for your family as well.
Correct.
It's pretty fucking cool.
It is pretty cool. It is pretty cool.
Can you talk about marketing with morality? We spoke a lot about how relationships are the most important thing, and how does that now translate with you were very specific actually with that wording. I'm interested to find out more.
So, marketing with morality. There is, I believe, especially business to business and business to consumer, I believe we are in a recession of trust. It is very, very easy now and you've seen this with, for example, the Manosphere documentaries, guys and girls exploring young, impressionable men into spending thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of them that they don't have, so that they can live this life of an alpha male, where they join run clubs that fucking chant war cries up and down fucking central high streets in Manchester and misogynize women and, fucking all these bits and pieces that you see. There are three things that I was taught from one of my very first mentors, and that everything that you do within business needs to be ethical, sustainable, and moral. So it needs to be moral in the fact that you shouldn't deliberately sell or market a product to someone who doesn't need that product, but who also isn't going to benefit just to line your pocket. You should do so with your ethics. You should do so in a practice that both of those combined become sustainable. So I'm not always necessarily talking about sustainability from like a net zero point of view, but is it sustainable as a business practice for you to be able to do that? They're the three things that you need to have. And you see it all the time of guys that sacrifice their morals and their ego to chase the next big thing and sell a product that doesn't work to people who don't need it, just to put the next zero in their bank account. And I hate it. Because the second you do that, you lose.
So how do you do things differently?
We have a quite strict customer profile. As in, these are the profiles of people that we work with, that we know we can serve. If you were to come to me with a problem and say, for example, we don't offer video editing as a service because I'm not a video editor. I don't have anyone on the team that can video edit. If you come to me and said, Mark, I've got a YouTube video that I need you to edit and I want you to do it. Can you do that for me? And I said yes, and I took money from you to do that, and then went, I'll figure that out later, and turned out a shit product. What I've done is I've put a price on that relationship that is what I deem more than my relationship with you and more than my morals. So it's just doing the basics right, in terms of not selling shit to people who don't need it or that you're not capable of doing, and then being able to be honest about that and doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. Which, not everyone's perfect. Everyone falls by the wayside with that sometimes. And again, that's also fine, but it's just about owning that shit.
Mm-hmm. So do you believe in staying in your lane?
Not always, because entrepreneurship, the literal definition of entrepreneurship is risk-taking. But everything you do around that needs to develop around it. So, for example, if you sell one particular kind of service or product and you branch into a different type of service or product, but nothing changes and that's not going to serve your audience correctly, and you're charging people a premium for that, you're doing so without morality. There's nothing wrong with switching lanes and going after a different objective and goal, as long as the outcome and the process shifts along with that.
Yeah, this manosphere stuff and there is a lot of a shift in marketing that I've seen in the last maybe 15 years of just because you're good with a camera and you're good with some lighting doesn't necessarily mean that the product or the service that you're providing is of high value. So
A
how
lot
do you...
of a lot of products like that are run by great marketers with terrible information in the back, or an upsell. There's a well-known property training company that takes you through a free funnel to get you to a one-day event. And the first thing they do on that one-day event is make you phone your bank to raise your credit limit on your credit card so that you can pay for the £15,000 upsell at the end of the course. Where the fucking hell is the morality and ethics in that?
Yeah. Business doesn't need to be that way. Business doesn't need to be outcome based. It doesn't need to be numbers based. This whole discussion that we have had today has been based around relationships, values, ethics, standards, having a North Star that guides every decision, things that you do. And it is disappointing to hear when businesses don't do that, because it doesn't need to be that way. You can be financially successful and still have great relationships and still look after your staff and still look after your family.
Correct. It comes back to bite you one way or another. Look at the founder of Brewdog and look at what happened there. Absolute arse of a boss, lost billions of pounds. Just goes to show.
Yeah, it really does. Mark, I'm going to be respectful of your time here, and we've got covered a quarter of what I wanted to get done. I've really enjoyed it, but I think we'll leave it there at that point with this. The bits that I'm going to really resonate on is the power of connections through the relationships that you have. You've been through some really tough times, and what has brought you through is the connection from your family and your friends. And you're very fortunate to have that. And that's what I'm going to reflect on.
Cool. And thank you very much for having me, mate. I'll always come back.
I think there is definitely scope for round two. Mark,
for sure.
Jen, thank you very much for your time. I've really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's been fascinating, and thank you for being so humble and vulnerable as well.
No, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're a gent.
Thank you, mate.